Okay, we're about to go live.
I think it is. Is it?
I think we're live. I hope we're live.
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay, good. All right. Anyway, welcome back. Good afternoon or good evening to everyone who's joining us this evening. I'm once again with Peter Malone, who is also a candidate for South Ward for the Frankston City elections. And tonight we're going to be having a conversation about 20 minutes long, and we've allowed 10 minutes for Q&A as well. We're pretty pleased with the first attempt that we did on this. So tonight we're going to be talking about renewal and revitalisation of Frankston CBD and the Nepean Highway area. Peter, how's your day been?
Look, it's been good, Stephen. Always busy, of course, but yeah, it's a busy day. But it's been I've completed a few things, got a few things finished, which is good.
Good. I'd like to say I'd had a few things finished today, but it just seems to be a list that gets longer and longer.
That's right.
A bit like the list for Frankston Council, really,
Wow.
in terms of the things we need to see done.
What
are your thoughts on?
Yep.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on what we need to do to renew Frankston CBD in the Nepean Highway District?
Yeah. All right. Look, as we've discussed, Stephen, there's certainly a long list. There's a long list. There's a few things we've got to think about. I mean, maybe the first thing we can kick off anywhere, but we could talk about parking. I've talked to quite a few people about parking. We've talked about it. Parking is an issue in Frankston, and there's a few reasons why it's an issue. And one of the reasons is that, of course, the railway line, of course, it's the end of the line. People come from lots of other places to park at Frankston, the end of the line, so they can get to the city or further up towards the city at least. Now, you just quickly, I mean, there is talk, of course, how that could change for numbers of people, and I think that's the case. However, there's still going to be quite a good number of people wanting to travel, use Frankston as a car park and travel to the city, even with the changes of, you know, working at home, etc.
Yeah, I've had a few people reached out today to ask about or to comment on parking.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of debate that goes on in different places and different groups in Frankston about whether we actually have a parking problem or not. I know the Committee for Greater Frankston is quite concerned about the kind of long-term all-day parking.
Yes.
In particular, parking that's available for sort of employees of businesses and so on.
Yeah.
And certainly there's a lot of council-run parking, which is, you know, they've lifted the fees on that for now. There's a danger that those fees go back on at some point in the future. I'm also conscious that Bayside Shopping Centre is wanting to put quite a big redevelopment in there as well. But I know from my own personal experience that I'd rather go and say shop in Coringal, where I can get free parking and not have to worry about it, than even pay for, you know, 15 minutes of parking in Bayside. And I think that's part of the problem. We actually need a solution where we bring all of these different stakeholders together.
Well, I agree. And it's an interesting thing you say, that the difference between, say, zipping over to Coringal, parking for free. I mean, I've thought about it a little bit. What's the problem with this paying for parking? In one sense, I look at, if I'm going there to shop, well, I'm lucky in one sense because often I don't have to. I work at Chisholm Tape, so that aside, if I'm don't have that available and I'm wanting to get into Frank, do some shopping, and I don't have to lug it across the road. What annoys me about parking is it the amount, and it probably isn't so much the amount. It's not the amount that I have to pay particularly. That's for me. It's, you know, a couple of dollars, whatever it is. I can't even remember because it's not a big impost. it's really the inconvenience and the nervousness of, am I going to be a little bit longer than I thought I'd be, or how much is it going to cost if I'm longer, or, if you park underneath, of course, well, there's no problem. If you park where it's free on the street, often it's not easy to get that park. It's free, but then that's nervousness of it, the whole nervousness of, well, will I go a bit over without noticing and get a parking ticket?
Mm.
I do have I did think, I haven't talked to you about this before. I did have a thought about that, and it's, ruminations. The convenience thing, well, if people actually had issued some kind of a card, they go in, they just swipe it, it opens the boom gate, they go out, they swipe it, they keep it in their car, they get lower cost parking fees, perhaps, and it's the convenience thing is there. To have to go and get a ticket, put the thing in, and this and that and whatever, when you're going is a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, that's one.
I know up in Southland, they now have an automated system and basically takes a photo of your registration plate. And then if you're there more than your free 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever it is they allow, you then have to pay as you leave. And I think that sounds a bit better. The other thing that strikes me about that whole CBD area is there are so many vacant shops. Yes. The office space in there is underutilized. I can't remember what the vacancy rate, but I know it's quite high.
It is.
Nobody wants to go to a CBD area, whether it's for entertainment, whether it's for shopping, or whether it's for work, in an area that feels like a ghost town. Now, admittedly, we're in a pandemic right now. So that makes it hard. But even before March, the number of vacant shop fronts, the kind of all the issues with a lack of business activity in there, I think is part of the problem around how we revitalise. Now, you can't revitalise a city centre unless you've got people. And it's either going to be the people that live in Frankston that come in there to either work or learn or shop or whatever it is, or be entertained. But perhaps we need more residential parts within that CBD. And if we think of that as kind of being bounded by the train line and the Nepean Highway.
Yeah, look, I agree with you on the vacant shops. Of course, we could lead on to talk about derelict buildings. There's certainly vacant shops, etc. They lend themselves, they look terrible, they start to become run down, and lend themselves to vandalism as well when they're vacant. So it's not good. So how do we sort of attack that issue? Well, there is some residential in there. Well, that could occur. It's a matter of, I imagine it would have to be residential, sort of, moderate sort of level units, nothing huge, because that wouldn't look good at all, but moderate sort of level of sort of units, a few people there perhaps. And of course, the thing is, we've got to try and understand one of the reasons why things are vacant or shops are vacant is because of the rents that are being charged. And why are higher rents being charged? Well, it's okay if you charge rents of a certain level if people are getting the business, and it comes back to that spiraling down thing, which we want to start to make spiral up, getting people into the centre. So ways in which we can get people in there, as you're saying, is the really important thing. And there's a few things and developments that are occurring that might help that too. Some, which are, of course, the state government developments with the walkway and the thoroughfare sort of thing, the infrastructure will be built between the university, TAFE, and Frankston's business district.
So that'll connect the kind of the education, or the Chisholm TAFE, that'll connect it better to the CBD. But again, if people aren't going to want to go into a place that feels cold and empty and derelict, it strikes me that one of the things that we're missing for the Frankston CBD is people thinking about that interaction between people, place, and the environment. I mean, we don't take advantage of the fact that we're on a bayside location.
That's right.
It's not reflected in the architecture that we've got.
Nope.
The last thing we want is sort of glass and concrete blocks. I know the Southeast Water building is quite contentious. Personally, I think it's quite ugly.
Me too.
I do think the fact that it brings a lot of jobs into the area is a good thing.
Yeah.
But then you've got that whole strip along there where I think you don't want to go high rise, maybe sort of low and medium rise. But then as you head back towards the train station, that might then give you space for taller buildings.
Well, yes. The part of the thing, the historical thing about Frankston, which people talk about, is that Frankston, with its back to the wonderful asset of the bay, which is a bit of a feature of Frankston, and we need to start, trying to get away from that. How you do it's going to be interesting, but the livability or the pleasant experience of going into central Frankston has got to be brought about through a better sort of a built environment that where people are more comfortable. So we've got vacant shops, we've got this and that. What about some areas where people can sit down in a pleasant sort of a bit of a pleasant parkland environment? I'm not talking about huge parks here, just spaces which are tended and taken care of, and having lunch. I mean, it will be okay one day, not too far in the distant future, to actually buy some takeaways, sit down, and maybe go back and do some more shopping. If it's a pleasant thing like that, instead of thinking, oh, well, let's buy something and quickly get away. Well, if there were, just, I don't know, some little leafy green areas in some places where people could sit down, have lunch, or just rest. Once again, if they didn't have to worry about parking and getting parking tickets or how much is running up on the tab, then that's another thing too. So there is a number of these things interconnecting.
And then if that connection between the TAFE and over the railway or whatever it is planned to do would actually make it easier for people to not have to bring their vehicle into the CBD.
Yes.
And then you get more pedestrian activity. We just had a comment from Frankston Politics Watch. So thank you to them for their comment. But council can't dictate rental level. I agree. I don't think that's what you're saying, Peter.
No,
I think
it wasn't what I was saying.
More around how we make sure that it's justifiable for property owners to have a rent at that level because they can say that there's enough people coming through. So it's about getting people into the CBD. But the other part of that, I think the other part of that, of course, is that the rental levels are dictated by market demand.
Yes.
There is a concern I've got, and you and I talked about this as well, is that with the number of derelict buildings that we have, particularly in that Nepean Highway section, which really is the gateway to Frankston. Certainly since Peninsula Link took a lot of the traffic away from the Murdoch Highway.
That's right.
And pushed it down the Nepean Highway. If people want to go down the peninsula and they want to drive through Frankston to take the scenic route, they'll come down Beach Road and down the Nepean Highway. And what they're greeted with is
they're not greeted.
I mean, it doesn't welcome people to stop. It doesn't welcome people to say, you know what, I'm going to just pop into Frankston here. I'll take a break before I carry on down towards Mornington or further down the peninsula.
Look, I agree. They're not greeted, really, are they? It's almost quick drive through here and get down to a destination. Now, remind me how many $100,000 are sitting there for a partial, at least road sort of redevelopment there, which would help. I thought it was something like for a number of years, for half a dozen years, there's been 600,000 to 700,000 sitting there in a budget of main roads, which hasn't been used by the current council for 6 years or whatever, because there was some dispute about exactly how the money would be spent. So it languishes there. It's not enough to put back into central revenue. So that would be a start. And there's other things too, which we've talked about the town planning about town planning, that you know, the rules, regulations, a nice solid town plan whereby councillors could go out and talk to the people who own these derelict buildings and talk about redevelopment, talk about what they might do, talk about certainty for them, and try and get a conversation going. And I don't think there's been any attempt in that regard over the last number of years, and it's really needed. Pancake Parlour and all of the rest of them. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm aware there've been a number of different proposals put forward by state government, by Committee for Greater Frankston, by property owners themselves.
Yep.
But I'm struggling to understand why it is we haven't seen more forward movement with that.
Yeah. Negotiation skills in council, and I'll say that you need people in there who can actually negotiate in a reasonable way. There's always a solution, and I really think there is a solution to this. I think there's that $700,000. I believe state government, as you're talking, you know, I believe they would actually be willing to throw a bit in as well, because it's absolutely to their benefit too, to the current state government, to see things go well in that entry into Frankston. So I think it's really possible. That's something that I actually feel quite confident about, but it just takes people who have negotiation skills and you know, have a reasonable sort of a front piece to talk about. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Peter. And the one of the things that occurs to me as well is that with the new lights at the football stadium, which is just that little bit out of the CBD area, in all likelihood, it's going to invite more people into Frankston. So, and picking up on another comment from Frankston Politics Watch is, if we had another 500 or 600 free parks on the way for Frankston, what sort of area would we actually want to see that in? And I'm just kind of wondering, you know, if I think about the physical environment, you don't want to have car parks that are just smack bang in the middle, or do you disperse them then between different spots? We've already got, you know, there's already high demand around the art centre area for parking there. You don't want to start encroaching further outside of the CBD. So, you know,
well, there's the railway station car parking going up, of course. I'd really like to look at those plans in more detail. I think we do need more parking. Let's just do a bit more parking and a bit more, and do it in a really nice planned way, because I know there's people who are a little bit concerned about the design of the or what might happen with the car park and the you know, the railway station car park that's going to go ahead. Now I'm for more parking, but I would also like that to be a reasonable design, because you want that flow through from the TAFE especially, because I know we've just had phase 1, we've got phase 2, and that is, we've been told that will start in the middle of next year, despite everything, and it's because it's about construction jobs, so it will start. And stage 3, not a long time after that, probably early the following year. So there's going to be, it's not going to, I know I work there, but it will be magnificent, and there'll be a lot more students. So
presumably then, you know, if we had better residential accommodation in the CBD area, and I think we need to be really conscious of not intruding too much on the kind of foreshore area. So if I was to think about the western side of the Nepean Highway, I'd be very reluctant to see any high-rise and even medium-rise development across there. But also there are still a handful of heritage frontages that exist along there, and it'd be wonderful if you could kind of retain some of those. Even if you were to build behind them. As we've seen in other parts of Melbourne. I think about some of the development that I've seen go on in Geelong. You know, Geelong's really, the Geelong city centre and the foreshore area has really transformed itself. We don't want to be Geelong. We don't want as many high rises as that. But
I agree with you. And you've got, I mean, we've talked about some of the, there's that, you know, as you said to me earlier, you know, you look up and you see these heritage, you know, parts of heritage buildings. And I've talked about and previously about sensitive development, around the beachfront in Canada. And that, I really mean that. I don't mean rampant development. I mean really sensitive development. You can build structures or make things look a lot better around car parks, etc., around the back of, was it Century 21, that area there. You can do things there which will blend in and enhance the sort of the heritage values of the other buildings that have been there for a long time. You don't want to crowd them out, but if you do something there, you've got to basically make it align and blend in. So I think there's that opportunity. And once again, that would help Frankston to have its own central business district, and right next to it, let's face it, it's 3 minutes walk down the road from the cinemas. You hit the highway, and then across the road, you've got basically, you're into sort of Canada Creek and then the beach. So it's all very close. And just the sense, giving a sense of accessibility and a pleasant place to go to is very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got to give people a reason to be there. So it's more than just the buildings. It's how the place feels. It's the aesthetics of it.
Yeah.
It's about having compelling events down there. I know, was it last year or the year before, we lost the Sandcastle people.
Yeah.
That was a huge attraction for people coming into.
It was a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And obviously, post-COVID, the world's going to be a little bit different, which does make me think about how we can also make sure that CBD sort of commercial district also is a place that offers, small and medium-sized businesses, social enterprises, startups, and so on.
Yes.
A place where they can start to emerge without having to worry about whether they go up to the city or not. But that would require a bit more, I think, strategic thinking and a bit more vision than what we've already seen.
Well, absolutely. There's little things you can do on the ground. There's that tax that we need taken away from businesses in Frankston. We've talked about that. That's almost a no-brainer to do that. But as you say, to look at revitalising and what you can do beyond that, well, there's not much being done. The derelict buildings are there. This doesn't appear to have been a lot of effort there, and that needs effort and skills, negotiation skills. That's one thing. Looking at the problem with the vacant shops, there's another thing that certainly you need a little bit of vision and to look at that. And as I've said before, the rents are a certain thing. Council can't do anything, it's private enterprise. But we have to create an environment where the marketplace demands that rent, but it's viable for business because there's people coming in, and we've made it a pleasant place for people. So that's what it's all about. So there's a job there to be done, so it'd be great to get started on that job.
Yes,
I feel enthusiastic a little bit before the time, of course, but it'd be great to get in and start. It really would make a difference.
I think the potential there is quite fantastic. When you look at, we've got Monash University, we've got Chisholm TAFE, we've got the hospital redevelopment going on.
Yep.
You could almost imagine with a bit more digital infrastructure and a bit more pedestrianisation and cleaning up, because nobody's going to be able to rent out a shop front that's next to a derelict building because it's going to scare customers away.
Yeah, not at all.
But we could have a real, if we were to say, right, let's make Frankston a health, education and startup hub.
Yes. Yeah.
So that people aren't traveling, 50, 60 kilometers up the road to go and do what they want to do in the city. But I've actually got all of that here. The potential is quite magnificent, particularly when you think about the sort of growth rate of something like 9,000 additional residents that are going to be coming into the city and so on. I'm just wondering what else there is that can be done around that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too. You've got sort of at the same time as we need to do something in Frankston, we have, as part of the greater Frankston, if you like, area, we have the developments that are going on at Coringal. Now, it's almost like a sort of a slight, Frankston satellite, not far away, but you want connection there as well. You want Frankston Central to be a a viable competitive business district to that. Now, why would it be? Well, it has to have some of the same things. It also has more. It has more. So I don't want to detract, because Kringel's going to be great. You know, let's face it, it's going to be fantastic. But you have the opportunity to do similar things in Frankston to make it better, and you've got the beach, and you've got Canada Creek. So with some work around that sort of piece, I think it's a very...
And actually, now you say that, it makes me think that there's the opportunity for more sort of boutique or localized retailers and businesses to be in there. Because if you look down Main Street, Mornington, as an example, and I'm not suggesting that Frankston and Mornington are the same kind of place.
No, however.
But you've got a Main Street there, which is really well thought through. You've got a whole range of different kinds of cafes, restaurants, boutique shops, lots of independent businesses. But then you can go into the bigger complex down the road, where you've got your kind of chain retail and so on. And it seems to me that there's this kind of mix. Joe Price just asked us to comment on how we imagine development supporting vulnerable communities, social housing, disability access, health precinct, local neighbourhood precinct, etc. It's a great question, and thanks for the question, Joe. I might kick off on that one, Peter, if that's okay. I think we've got a real issue here, and if you were to look at the debate that occurred last week over the Ambassador Hotel, is we've got a real issue about how we make sure that we've got integrated service provision for vulnerable people who are in Frankston City. From talking to some of the homeless people who are staying sort of near the foreshore areas, they feel unsafe. They don't feel that they've got good access to some of the services that are available to them. And the other thing they complain about is the short stay accommodation is short stay. Yes. And so what they're finding is, okay, well, if you're a homeless person or a vulnerable person, you're in somewhere for 6 weeks and then you've got nowhere else to go. And I think that similarly, as I've seen in other places, is having a mixture of both social housing and private housing can actually work really well in terms of integrating people, but also it means that we can have an integrated service delivery as well for those people who need it. And I think that's, certainly that's my view on it. What about you, Peter?
Yeah, look, I'm glad it's been brought up actually, because, okay, well, I was actually going to do a little piece on, and I went down there this morning actually, to the yacht club, because, okay, some of us and other people and different people have taken a photo of the, the board, what's going to happen to the yacht club and all of that. I won't get into it. And I've taken my photos, etc. But then I walked around the back, and now there was two guys there, and I drove down this morning. I was going to take a photo of the people sleeping rough in that little alcove there. Not the people, actually, just the place. And usually there's nobody there. Now it started raining, so there was actually two guys there. And one guy's name was David. And I told them both I was bad with names, and they gave me little clues to remember, because I had a good long conversation with them and I listened to their stories. And I think when you listen to some of these stories, these people, yeah, a little unshaven and all of that, but gosh, they had hearts of gold. And they would have worked, they would do anything to try and better themselves. So I really think we have to take care of people like this. We have to help reintegrate them back into society. Take care of them, and one started talking to me about, proposing, look, if you take over someplace, I'll run it for you and all this. He was racing ahead with ideas, and it was something I couldn't really take up, but I will look into, talk to local politicians and see if we can do something for them. But yeah, look, certainly in helping the business community in Frankston, my thoughts are, I don't want to exclude anybody from success, big business or small business, but small business and small business operators, I have a particular feeling for. I can't pretend to ever having been one, but I know I feel like they're more like me. They're small operators trying to get ahead, and they anything we can do to help them. And the homeless, well, as I said, I've talked to them this morning. I think we really need to help lift them, give them a hand. We really do. And this program, there's a list of things that councils can do, and I've got that list. And certainly we'll be, as a council, I'd be wanting to go, or a councillor, I'd be wanting to go through that list and do all we can to help them out.
Well, I'm certainly with you on that, Peter. And I think that one of the challenges we've got is that the solutions keep getting kicked down the road.
Yes.
And actually, instead of just kind of, they're not even debating how to address these issues, is kicking it down the road.
Well,
I think getting the right kinds of events into the CBD, creating incentives for particularly small and medium-sized businesses to come back to the CBD.
Yes.
Get rid of the differential rates.
Yeah.
Create incentives to deal with the issue of derelict buildings.
Yeah.
If that, it may be that we have to look at something like a levy on unoccupied or derelict commercial properties.
Yeah, I did mention something in our chat earlier, Steve, sorry to butt in there, but I understand there is a levy, okay? And I understand that levy has been levied on only one place, only on one derelict building owner. I'd have to investigate it, I must say, as I said earlier, but I understand that's the case from a very good source, I won't say who, but we could look at that, but that's one of the levers. Wouldn't want to go off to those derelict building owners and say, guess what, buddy, I'm going to,
I think you want to get them around the table and say, right, what can we do together? How can we make obviously got to stay within the kind of the planning guidelines and the statutory requirements of that. But how can we work with them to have a bit of a kind of strategic plan for those buildings that are either underutilized or derelict, so we can really kind of bring our city back to life?
Yeah, I agree. We've got to get that spiral up going. As I keep thinking, spiral up. It needs a bit of energy to do that. Okay, you don't get something going the way you want it by just not doing much. It just, as you say, it gets kicked. Any of these problems get kicked down the road. You need to really think about it and try something. And I think there's a lot of things that we can give a go at, and I know it can work in the end. We can find solutions.
And we've seen that in other municipalities. We've seen it in other cities. We've seen it around the country, and we've seen it overseas, where kind of thoughtful planning, a real partnership between local government, property owners, business, the community, bringing all residents, bringing all those stakeholders together, you can actually end up with something very, very exciting.
I agree. Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Okay, great. Look, Peter, we've probably run about 15 minutes more than I expected, but I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
My pleasure.
Hopefully we can do this again Friday.
Yep.
I think we're hoping for, and we'll see if we can't get another guest or two to join us as well.
Yeah. It's always good to engage with people and get those questions coming in. As we say, if you're going to vote for somebody, you've got to know who they are and what they're about. We're quite happy to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Peter, and I'll talk to you soon.
G'day. Thanks. See you. Bye, everybody.